My name is Kraymr Grenke. I was born and raised here in Timmins, proudly running for the Conservative Party of Canada this fall in the election. I went to school here. I went to Floormac, Timmins High, and then I went away to university. And when I came back from university, I knew I definitely wanted to get back involved in the community. I went and I applied to the hospital board. I've been on the hospital board for about 2.5 years now. I'm on the Police Services Board, the Economic Development Corporation, and the Chamber of Commerce. So I've seen different parts of the community and their needs and their asks from the federal government, and how a new representative here in the north could definitely change some things around. And that's one of the biggest factors that pushed me to run in this fall election, is that we are definitely due for change. The current MP has done some work, but it's time to shift that into overdrive type of thing, and say, we need to create some opportunity. We need to create some funding opportunities and initiatives here in the north to make sure that our success is continued. And I can say that I've been to all four corners of the riding now. I've spent time in the James Bay coast last week. I've spent time down in the southern part of the riding. So definitely there are different needs and interests in each part of the riding. But ultimately it comes back to, we need opportunity. We need to be able to have that conversation in the House of Commons in Ottawa, and to ensure that, we can get things done here in the north. We have an amazing riding. I love living here. That's exactly why I came home. It's exactly why I want to represent the people of this riding, is that, we are so unique as Northerners, that we deserve a special voice and a strong voice, and that's exactly what I want to provide. I've had the conversations of some of the issues and perspectives that are happening up in the James Bay coast, what can happen up there. Down in Englehart, the agriculture boom that we've seen down there as it's become more and more prevalent, and here in Timmins, Kirkland Lake, and the surrounding regions, we've seen a definite mining push continue, and we need to continue that and look elsewhere also at other opportunities to ensure that we can look beyond the next ore body and have success here in the north. The Conservatives are definitely for a resource-based economy, and ultimately that's what we are. We've strived ourselves for the past 120, 30 years on being resource-based here in the region, and it has done very well for us. Our platform as a party is definitely looking out for everybody in our constituencies, making sure that money is getting back into mine in your pocket, to ensure that we have that extra little bit of money at the end of the month. We've seen costs rising and continue to rise, and that hasn't stopped. And we need to get money back in our pockets to ensure that we can get ahead at month's end and at year's end, and to ensure that our kids can have the success that they need in the future as well. So I had that conversation. I was fortunate enough, when I was up there, I spoke to a grade 5-6 class at Moosonee Public, and one of the young gentlemen in that class talked to me about that. I said, well, what do you think about the prices of the northern store? And that was one of the first places that I visited when I went on the northern swing of my campaign tour. And I saw the prices firsthand, and I was there for 5 days. I lived the prices and purchased food for 5 days at those prices, and understood that doing this day in and day out is definitely a burden to a family. You can definitely understand that. I think through moderation and through the transportation, ultimately it comes down to transportation at that point. There's the talk of building out all-season road that would definitely combat some of that issue with the transportation, because if you can only transport by air or by land in the winter, that's definitely where you're seeing some of the issues. So working with those groups, not coming in and saying this is the plan. No, let's work together. Let's build a solution that's going to work to ensure that those prices can come down, because ultimately you can't continue to live at those prices. So I've had those conversations with First Nation leaders around here, and when I was talking to constituents up the coast, and I said that is definitely one of our priorities. We look at the water issues that have been, in this riding alone, they've been around for too long, and I really think that's where I struggle as I go on the campaign tour and whatnot, is why hasn't that been alleviated? Why hasn't the current MP been able to fix that problem? We've seen it in the past where, Peawanuck's a prime example. They were moved to Peawanuck, within a short period of time to ensure their longevity by a conservative government, about 2-3 decades ago, and the same thing with New Post. They were moved by a conservative government also to ensure that they could get ahead as well. But that's exactly where we need to have that conversation with someone with a strong voice in Ottawa, and to ensure that those problems can be alleviated in a short period of time. The Conservative government is very focused and committed to ensuring those issues are alleviated in a short period of time once they're in power. I mean, whether they're new, fresh, or just they're focused on everyday life, and that's ultimately it. I mean, most of us, that's what we look for in a government, is who can help myself get, move forward and get ahead. And that's where I see a few things in the Conservative Party that have definitely come about. Anything from the children's activity tax credit. I had, when that was announced by my leader Andrew Scheer, when that was coming back out, I had 3-4 friends call me and say, that's amazing. My kids play hockey, my daughters dance, my kids do all of these things. Being able to have that, will help me, have a little bit extra money to it. It wasn't just put it back in their pocket. No, I can help them buy a few more things. And it's things like that, and that's ultimately our platform is, let's get ahead for everybody, and to ensure that costs are starting to stay moderate. That's a thing as well, because we can't just keep increasing our costs, adding taxes to everything, and spending beyond our means. I mean, nobody does that in a household. The government should be able to do that also. And the other biggest thing that I really feel strongly about inside the Conservative platform at this point is that we want to take care of our own here in Canada. The Canadian motto is that we want to help as many people as we can, but we have social issues. We have veterans that aren't being supported here in our country. We need to help them first. We talk about foreign aid, and Andrew Scheer wants to cut back a little bit on foreign aid to ensure that programs within this country are viable and we can take care of our own here before we look to take care of people abroad. I think of that, from especially a northern perspective, but ultimately a Canadian perspective. There's lots of rural and northern communities in Canada, and when the carbon tax was implemented, it was not thinking about the average everyday Canadian. Overnight prices went up, and you and I and thousands of other people in this riding still have to drive to work. Prime example, my father drove 30 kilometers each way to work every single day. Fortunately, doesn't have to do that anymore as he's retired, but those people still have to drive to the surrounding areas, and ultimately that having the carbon tax doesn't make them drive less, doesn't make them more eco-friendly, and that's where the green technology stuff that the Conservative Party wants to invest in, that's where we need to get ahead. We need to reinvest in ourselves. Climate change definitely is a big thing. We want to do our best to combat that personally through investing in our homes and ensuring that we're as green as possible, but also climate change is a global issue ultimately, right? We see we're doing our best here, and we're pretty green here. We recycle well in our regions. We have, our cars are becoming more and more fuel efficient. But you look at other parts of the world, China, for example, that are still burning lots and lots of coal. That's where we need to take that global fight to. We have less of that here in Canada. We deal with, very fortunately, with hydroelectricity here in the north. We have lots of hydro dams here in the north, and that's something that we can succeed and excel with. So definitely I'm very strong with helping the environment, but doing it in a fact that, you and I can reinvest in ourselves. It's not it's not going to happen overnight, ultimately, right? We're not going to stop driving one day from the next, but we need to invest in our homes and in ourselves to ensure that we have reduced those emissions as much as possible. Yeah, I mean, they're faced with issues every spring and sometimes in the fall. When it comes to flooding has gotten worse and whatnot, and they understand that all of a sudden they just can't stop driving, or driving to wherever they have to go up there as well. That was the same conversation I had with someone up there. They still want to go out and hunt. They still want to do these things outside that require you and I to drive 20, 30, 40, 50 kilometers. Those still have to happen. And when we talked about investing in our communities and investing in our homes, that really struck with them, because they understood that, if they can lower our energy consumption at home, that's exactly where it is. And you said you don't drive 24/7, but your house is heated 24/7. So understanding, having that conversation was definitely rewarding and definitely receptive to people up the coast, that they agreed that let's invest in ourselves to ensure that we have that low emission possibilities. We definitely see post-secondary education as a value. I've talked about it in many different debates, saying, we're going to be lifelong learners forever at this point. We see, definitely in the mining industry, we see automation coming and people having to re-educate themselves and learn. And automation has that balance with, we have a shortage on jobs right now, which is unfortunate. So with technology, it's also making it safer, and that's ultimately the goal, is that everybody gets to come home at night from work. That we want to ensure. And so on the post-secondary front, we want to invest in our students and invest in our schools as a federal government to ensure that that burden doesn't come back onto the student. Ultimately, we want people to be educated moving forward, but we want to see investment in programs like here in Timmins at Northern College, Collège Boreal, and Université de Hearst, where it's investing with community partners. You look at definitely all the trades here in the north is what keeps us going. Having that investment where it's through the employer, through the college, and having that ability to go back to school without the ultimate burden onto the person is something that I think we should definitely look at and continue with, because that's how we're going to move ahead as lifelong learners. So I've had two very good professional experiences. I was an accountant here in Timmins with a national firm that did a lot of small business work. That was the first thing that I got to learn, is how to understand how small businesses operate, how they can get ahead also, and understanding that part of it, because Timmins in the region is built on small business. We don't have that large business here, where it's built on small businesses where people put their livelihoods on the line to invest and reinvest, and to ensure that people have jobs to come to. So between that and my time at the Waban Tribal Council, I ultimately very much enjoyed learning through the partnerships that I did with the First Nations groups, and spending time talking to people on reserves, the 5 reserves that I 5 First Nation communities that I represented, and understanding the work that they do and how that ties into all different types of industries and whatnot around here. We focused on health, economic development, and education. I got a really good understanding of how that all comes together for a First Nation community, and integrating that into other communities as well. So I definitely have that good understanding of how the First Nation communities operate here in the north. And I am very fortunate that I had that opportunity, and look forward to bringing that experience and skill set onto the next level of becoming an MP here for Timmins-James Bay. When we talk about representation, Andrew Scheer, through the polls and the statistics that are coming out, is going to be the next Prime Minister of Canada, and ultimately being on the government side is something that we've seen is a benefit to a riding. We've seen that throughout the north. We've seen that throughout the country. That being on that government side is definitely a thing. That's what I'm fighting for, is to be a member of Parliament on the government side with Andrew Scheer as the leader, to ensure that we can bring those innovation initiative funds here to the north. It's having access to those discretionary funding opportunities. Timmins-James Bay has been very fortunate with FedNor opportunities. We have great businesses, but FedNor is based 100% on merit. And through those businesses, they've done exceptionally well with FedNor funding, but we need to have the ability to have innovation funds to come to the north, and also infrastructure funds that aren't normally readily available to pick at, but through discretionary funding envelopes and being on the government side. Those are the things that I want to bring back to the north. I want the north to succeed. I was born and raised here. I want to grow old here. I want my family to grow old here with me. So this is where I want to be, and this is home to me. Well, that's the thing. Everybody who starts in the House of Commons is ultimately a newbie at one point in time. So I'm not any different than some of the others that that have started out in the House and have done very well. I mean, it won't happen overnight. I can definitely understand that, but you know what, this has been a region that hasn't been under the Conservative flag for a long time. That will definitely be noticed by my leader and by his senior level. You know what, this region has flipped to blue. What can we provide, you know, ultimately that region, and now that we are in power? So, you know, looking at things like that, having a strong voice saying, you know what, we have incredible opportunity. We have so much growth potential here in the north. We have the land capacity to do it, and also, you know, we've been a big part of Ontario and Canada through our resource sectors for a long time. You know, forestry, agriculture, and mining have put Timmins on the map. They really have, and they will continue to do so. And you know, no matter where you go, ultimately, you say, you know, you're from Timmins, Kirkland Lake, somewhere in the Timmins-James Bay region, they know where you're from. You know, we're in a special region here in the north that somebody knows somebody from this region, and ultimately 95% of the time has something good to say about that person. So, you know, we're a very unique brand of people up here. Nobody knows the north like a northerner, and I strive myself on being that voice saying, you know what, this is what's happening in our region, but I believe, you know, the Conservative government has a vision for the rural parts of our country. You know, Andrew Scheer has lived in Saskatchewan and in different parts of the country to understand, you know, what the rural parts of this country are really like, and Timmins fits into that rural and north part, and I definitely can see us having a strong voice at that table. That's a great question, because I know I sit on the Economic Development Corporation. That's the talks that we're having. It's, you know, how can we bring investment here to ensure we're looking beyond the next finding of the ore body. And I had that conversation with a young couple in Kirkland Lake the other day. I said, this is where we need to start looking. You know, we can bring manufacturing jobs outside of the mining sector, or you know what, we bring our manufacturing capacity here to the world stage. We've seen that in the north with businesses here. You know, they're getting shipped products from across the world, and they're shipping them out to Africa and, you know, ultimately the other side of the world here in the north. So let's put Timmins on the world stage, or let's bring the world stage to Timmins. We have the capacity to bring industries. We have the land to do it. We have the working capacity to do it. And we just need the investment part, and I believe that's where the federal government can come into play and say, you know what, let's invest in money in Timmins. Let's bring a different side of industry here into Timmins-James Bay, and we can move forward with that. Actually, you know, voter turnout in the north isn't horrible. There's worse parts in the country, which is good to see. Ultimately, you know, I'm a young person as well. This is, you know, I've voted a few times, but you know, and I think that's where the relation is for young voters. They can see somebody on the ballot that they can relate to, and that's ultimately one of the things that I'm running on. You know what, I'm going to grow old with you. I'm looking 50 years down the road, because I expect to be here in 50 years, and I'm looking, you know, for my children. You know, I have that versus, you know, some of the people that I'm running against, that, you know what, they're looking a couple years down the road type of thing. You know, I'm looking 20 years down the road, because, you know, my kids will hopefully, you know, be 15 or so in 20 years. So how can I look out for them? And that's what I want to, you know, speak to young voters about, that I'm here with you. I want us to succeed together, and I can't do it alone. And we're seeing, you know, the baby boomer generation being moved out of the workforce as they get older, and we're the next up to ensure that workforce becomes viable. So let's work together to ensure that we can make it viable, and that the north stays as strong as possible. I definitely believe Andrew Scheer will do that when he's elected Prime Minister. You know, this is the turmoil part. 39 days of an election period to ensure a winning strategy, and I believe that himself and his cabinet and ultimately all the MPs that are elected under him will do that. They will bring this country together. They have a vision that is for the average Canadian. It really is. It's to ensure that, you know, money's getting back in the average Canadian's pocket through, you know, universal tax credits for children, for activities and things like that, to ensure, you know, we can become a strong force in the world and be recognized on the world stage as people want to invest in Canada. So I definitely believe that he and his cabinet will bring our country together, and we'll come out stronger than ever. see the value and energy here in Canada. You know, we see the issues on the East Coast where, you know, they're buying oil from overseas when ultimately they can come and produce jobs here in our country. There's a right and a wrong way to do everything, of course, you know, whether it's oil and gas in Alberta or we're talking about the Ring of Fire here in Ontario. It's you know, there's a right and wrong way to do the process, and I believe that we have the ability to do it the right way. When you look at the Ring of Fire, the conversations that are being had, you know, unilateral conversations with all the First Nations communities along the road that they want to build, I believe that's a good way to do it, because that way, if you do it as a group, somebody might get left behind. But you do it individually, you can understand and you can hear the issues and the concerns of each group as you move forward on that road, and that's what you want. You don't want somebody to get left behind and their issues aren't being heard. That's the way that has to be done. You have to have those conversations to ensure that, you know, the safety of the environment is there, the safety of the people that live around there, and ultimately that it's good for everybody. And that's what, you know, can be done in Alberta or can be done in Ontario. Those conversations can be had to ensure that our success is there. I believe in Andrew Scheer. I mean, he grew up much like many of us did in Northern Ontario. He grew up, you know, in the Ottawa region, you know, with two parents. He lived in a townhouse with his family. You know, I grew up in a very middle-class family. His family didn't have a car when they grew up. And, you know, that struck me when I first started reading about, you know, Andrew and wanting to run for him, is that he knows, him and his family and his parents knew the struggles of what it was like to get by in a Canadian family household. He talked about it at one of his interviews where his father, you know, canceled some of his magazine subscriptions so that Andrew's sister could go to dance. And, you know, those are the sacrifices that people make in Northern Ontario. They really do. That, you know, they can't do everything, and there has to be that balance. And that's ultimately why I can get behind him and say, you know what, he knows exactly what it's like to live a normal life here in Canada, and ultimately that's what I grew up in. You know, I had a father that grew up in the mining sector, and I had a mother that worked in the financial institution. And, you know, one day my father came home and said, you know what, I don't have a job anymore because, you know, our plant is closing. So, you know what, he ultimately didn't have that, but he knew exactly what those struggles were like. And that's one of the biggest reasons I can get behind him, is that he knows exactly what it's like to live in a normal Canadian family. Like I've said, you know, throughout the interview, and I've said it all the debates, I'm here to live here with you. I'm here to grow old with you. No matter what age you are at this point, I'm very much committed to living in Timmins-James Bay, and I always have. That this has always been home, and it's been an amazing place to live, and I want to grow my family here as well. I believe I can bring a strong voice to Ottawa with the leadership of the Conservative Party winning on October 21st, and, you know, I want to be that strong voice. I want to bring some change back to Timmins-James Bay, and some new initiatives, having the conversations on every corner of the riding. Every part of the riding has different things, but there's many things that are similar that we can help each other with. Ultimately, I'm not here to do it alone. I do need help from our constituents to understand the different issues, but more than willing to work with anybody that has any questions or concerns, and more than willing to have those conversations now and post-election when I get elected on October 21st.